Minnesota has ended the 22-year bull streak of this proud Wisconsin Badgers football program. This 5-7 campaign in 2024 might be the low of the new millennium in Madison.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Midway through the season, Wisconsin was sitting there with a 5-2 record coming off a 3-game win streak where they were starting to really get it clicking. They had a 5-2 record in year number 1 with Luke Fickell. Now, they finished that season last year with a 7-5 record. This year, not the same story. They lose their last 5 games down the stretch. They lose Paul Bunyan's axe, and they lose that mark of consistency that this Wisconsin Badgers program has been known for. That 22 consecutive years that they have been to a bowl game. The Wisconsin Badger fan base really takes a lot of pride in the consistency, the good consistency that this Wisconsin Badgers program has had through the years. And now that they cannot hang their hat on that, now that they cannot go to a bowl game for the 23rd consecutive year, there's going to be a lot of looking in the mirror for this Wisconsin Badgers football program. But, you know, there is going to be some talk about the future of Badger football towards the end of this reaction. But you got to give a lot of credit to P.J. Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Beginning of this season, this was a Minnesota program that had an over-under, a ridiculous win total over-under at 4.5, yet they come out of this one with 7 when all was said and done. It was the easiest bet that anybody could have made, but P.J. Fleck just continues to be one of the really good head coaches in this conference in the Big Ten. All right, let's dive into this specific matchup that went down on Black Friday. You know, during halftime, I got my plate ready of turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy and those elite leftovers, and I got my stuffing. Now, I maybe love stuffing more than any other food on the Thanksgiving table. Well, Wisconsin's run game was stuffed in this one by the Minnesota Golden Gophers. It is an adage as old as time when it comes to successful football. Run the ball and stop the run. And that was the game plan, and it was executed to perfection by the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Corey Heatherman has done a really good job filling in for Joe Rossi as the defensive coordinator of this Gophers team. Wisconsin, 24 carries, 36 yards on the ground. We've talked about over the last 2 years since Luke Fickell has come into Madison that this Badgers team just doesn't have that identity. Right? They don't have that identity that they've had for the last couple of decades, and they don't have an identity. And this was just another microcosm of that, where Wisconsin needed to be able to run the football because, we'll talk about this guy in just a minute, because when you put the ball into the hands of Braden Lock, he's not going to be that guy that's going to be able to lead you to a victory. Minnesota's ability to stop this Wisconsin run game gave them a gigantic leg up in this game, and they stifled them. And the game plan for Minnesota coming into this one, stop the run, let's trust our defensive backs to cover, and I thought the DBs did a really good job covering in the secondary as well. Wisconsin was not able to get downfield a lot in this game. Minnesota was in the hip pocket of these Wisconsin wide receivers a lot during the afternoon. So we talk about that on the defensive side of Minnesota. What about on the offensive side for the Minnesota Golden Gophers? I told you during the preview, Darius Taylor was due. The trend continues. 100-yard game, and then 2 sub-100-yard games. He comes back to a 100-yard game, and he did that in this game. Really, the second half, they leaned heavy into Darius Taylor. 32 carries, 143 yards on the ground for number 1 in maroon and gold today. Minnesota had a really balanced offense. I thought you could see early in the game, I thought Wisconsin was playing pretty well against the run, right? But here's the thing about Minnesota's offense. They have a very balanced offense. Max Brosmer, they took advantage of his passing ability, and they were the hit plays down the field to Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer. The plays that Max and this passing game were able to make really got them the points on the board that they needed. in the first half and throughout this game to be able to pull away with a 24-7 victory in the end. Let's talk about Wisconsin being locked out. And they were locked. And here's the thing about being locked out with Braden Lock at quarterback. His keys might not work right when he comes back to the facility. Excuse me. Right, he was a guy that that was very tight with Phil Longo. Considering what we saw in Madison, I'm not sure if he's going to come back to Madison certainly next year. But like I said with Minnesota's defense and stopping the run, when they stop the run game, Braden Lock has to be the guy. He ain't the guy. He ain't the guy to do it. Now, this game was a lot like what we've seen over the past 2 years with Braden Lock. We've seen something like in the second half, they were starting to move the ball a little bit with the passing game. They got on the board with that touchdown drive. But he just can't consistently make good and accurate throws, right? There's times where he can get those crossers going across the middle and he can put it there, but there's other times where he just makes throws that just make you want to rip your hair out. Like there was a throw where he's just checking it down to a running back and he puts a ton of zip on it and he throws it behind. I mean, this is a basic throw. Put some touch on it, lead your back, get a couple of yards, and he just couldn't make that throw. He has not shown the consistent ability to be consistently accurate and be able to run this offense. Locke had just 37 passing yards in the first half. This was an all-time bad performance in the first half for Wisconsin. Even the punt guys came back. Punts. They were loving it. Wisconsin punting the ball in the first half. Those guys that were at the Nebraska and Iowa game last season. Locke overall, 15 of 32, 130 yards and a touchdown. Here's the crazy thing about this. He didn't throw an interception. Now, there were interceptable balls, if that's a word, if that's a phrase that we can use in the English language. But there were plays where Minnesota could make the plays, but they just dropped him. They couldn't end up making the plays throughout this one as well. You know, the struggle bus was ridden again for this Wisconsin offense. There's been times this year where you've seen bright spots, but they have not been able to do, whether it's running the ball, whether it's throwing the ball, whatever it is. They haven't been able to do things consistently on offense, and Minnesota certainly took advantage of that. You know, I am going to talk about Wisconsin a little bit more now, but I just want to hammer the point home again of this is a Minnesota team that's going to finish the year 7-5. But let's remember, I remember being on the sidelines for this one early in the year, a missed field goal at the horn against North Carolina. Remember that bad onside kick call against Michigan. Right? Look at this past weekend against Penn State and how close they came there. This was a team. 7-5 to 9-3, a razor-thin margin maybe for Minnesota, but this could be another year. You march into a bowl game, you get out of there at 8-5. That'd be a really good 8-5 season for PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So a ton of credit and a ton of congratulations should certainly go to Minnesota. All right, let's finish this thing off talking about the future and really the view of Badger football right now after this loss. I thought there was so much on the line for Wisconsin coming into this game. And I talked about it already with bowl eligibility, with the Axe. They lost a ton of games coming into this one. There should have been a ton of motivation. Right, this was being at home. This was a game where Wisconsin really should have came up playing with their hair on fire. This just seemed like an unmotivated performance, and we've seen them in the past 2 years for this Wisconsin Badger football program. Here's the cold, hard truth. This is a Badger team. Luke Fickell needs to look himself in the mirror and say, what I'm doing, how I'm organizing my team, how I'm developing my team, lack of development, it ain't working. Through 2 years, it ain't working. Major changes need to happen at Wisconsin. This is a Big Ten conference that gets better and better and deeper and deeper and deeper as the years go on. Look, schools like Michigan, schools like USC, they're not going to be 506-6 forever. They have more resources than a program like Wisconsin does. So Wisconsin needs to be able to outdevelop them. They need to be able to do the things that Michigan and USC and the programs like that aren't doing, and they just need to be better at that aspect, really, of development. And this is a program that over these 2 years, like Braden Lock is a perfect example, Right? He has not developed. Has he regressed as a quarterback? Maybe. There's a lot in this program that has regressed in year 2 as we compare it to year number 1 within this program. So we know about this already. I talked about this already. Luke Fickell needs to nail this offensive coordinator hire, and he needs to find a way to, whoever he hires, bring a lot of those key pieces with him and rejuvenate this offense in Madison. He needs to find, right, retainment is such a key word, and it's such a key thing in college football nowadays. You look at some of the good young talent on this team. Trech Kekahuna, Vinny Anthony really stepped up at the end of this season. Xavier Lucas has been a good freshman on defense so far this season. You need to find a way to not have a transfer portal exodus. We've seen it happen. And then when that happens, it can really be tough the next season. Like, this is a thing that kind of needs to be burnt down and built back up. But here's the thing about next season for Luke Fickell. It's year 3, and you're sitting there with a 500 record. You need to be good next year, because if you're not, and if you don't show signs of progress, you're going to be gone. Chris McIntosh is gonna run your butt right out of town. So we know that the major changes needed to happen. Will Luke Fickell and this staff adjust to that? It remains to be seen. But here's what I look at when I look at next season. The schedule, you could argue like this year, does themselves absolutely no favors next year. Here's some of the games that are on the schedule next year for the Badgers. They go to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. They go to Indiana. We'll see how the Hoosiers are after losing a lot of seniors this season. At Michigan, we know what they're doing, stockpiling talent, certainly with the financial backing that they have right now. They got to go to Autzen to play the Oregon Ducks. That's probably not going to go well. They play Ohio State at Camp Randall, and that doesn't even mention games like going to Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa once again on the schedule for the Wisconsin Badgers. Next year is going to be no picnic, folks. Major changes need to happen in Madison, Wisconsin, if this is a program that at least wants to be respectable next season. I'm very curious to see what kind of moves that this Badger team is going to make. Now, the thing about Wisconsin's development over the years and how they've been able to develop players pre-Fickell and even last season has been those bowl practices. 22 consecutive years. They've always been able to bank on that extra development with young players with those 15 extra bowl practices. They don't have it this year when they desperately need it to build their future. So that's it. Congratulations to the Minnesota Golden Gophers and PJ Fleck on having a good season and a really solid campaign when many expected them maybe not to have a solid campaign. For Wisconsin, there's a lot of looking in the mirror to do. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.